welcome everyone to another VITA North America live webinar. Today we've got Mr. Mark Wagenseil, Denturist of Canada, that is not just a denturist, but an educator, understands you as a technician, what you're going through on the bench, and loves to help and guide you to make sense out of all the cases that you see in front of you. Today we're going to address the combination syndrome, a denture case, edentulous maxillary with lower dentition, which is always, we get a lot of questions, don't we, Mark, about that and how to handle, how to set the teeth and so forth. So thank you for being here today with us, Mark.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You got it anytime, you know that. So Mark Wagenseil is a VITA Global Certified Trainer and Management Consultant. He's a licensed denturist and dental technician with over 30 years of experience. Should I move that up yet? 30 years? Yeah. Should I say 32, 33, 35?
You can move that up just a little.
40? Okay.
35
I know.
this year.
Yeah, really? Wow.
Yeah, I
know. Things go by fast, don't they?
Yeah, we have to enjoy life as it goes.
Mark owns and operates a denturist clinic, Heritage Denture Center in Edmonton, Canada. And he works there daily and is a wet, what we consider in the U.S. a wet finger dentist in a sense for dentures. So for the U.S. side, for those technicians that are attending, Marco is going to give us an insight on what he does from a clinical perspective as well as a technician's perspective, which is great, because then you can kind of tie those two ends together and make more sense of everything. Mark has spent his career focusing on how dentures integrate into the mouth and body, and he inspires a unique awareness of occlusion and professional growth of technicians, dentists, and other denturists. So welcome, Mark. And before we get going, though, I just want to remind everyone that your phone is on mute. So during the meeting, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a panel there. Just use the question box, type those in, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of the program. The program will be recorded. You'll be able to go visit that and revisit it because all of us love Mark and how he trains. We often view Mark with all the videos that he's done for the last couple of years, ever since COVID. And we appreciate your help with that, Mark, going over all sorts of different topics. So visit us at our VITA North America YouTube channel to see Mark presenting all sorts of different techniques. So visit us there. And then, Mark, I will turn it over to you if you're ready. So I'm going to make you the presenter. And you are now the presenter. So we'll be able to see your screen.
Okay.
And then there we go.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Thank you to VITA,
you are welcome.
VITA North America for their kind support and supporting us in our profession, in our denture profession. So thank you, and all the groundwork and behind the scenes work that Jim does to get these things off the ground. So thanks very much, Jim. We appreciate it from industry. So thank you, and welcome everyone. Hello, happy day, woot woot. So good morning. We do not slap teeth together, woot woot. So thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join me and to hear me out. I'm 52. I started when I was 17 caring for patients. I have a denturist license and a dental technician license here in Alberta in Canada. And it's the right profession for me. I love what I do. It's the right path for me and the right career path. And this is a little bit about sharing my journey and what I've gone through and some of the banging my head on the wall of why things weren't working when the textbook and school told me it sure should. Yet the patient is looking at you going, yeah, it's not working. So I've been down that path where I've remounted cases, and I thought my bite was right and centric was right, and that the extensions were good, and I couldn't see that it was short anywhere, and I had everything that I thought I was doing right. And these types of webinars are a capture of my journey that I wanted to share with the profession and the denture profession and denture-minded individuals as we try to make a difference in our communities and in our professions every day and with our patients. And I'm doing this to try and again make a difference and leave our profession better than when I got into it as we grow and share and expand and grow our profession and make it as much every day even more credible in the eyes of again our community. So thanks for joining me. Our common single denture issues that we experience every day, they're a little tricky, single dentures, and a lot of patients have a lot of problems with them. We certainly then offer implant therapy as a treatment option, and even after implants to retain an upper denture, people still have issues and with teeth breaking or inability to chew, etc. So I wanted to just quickly run through a few things first before we got into the hands-on portion of the program to show you how I approach this subject. Some of the issues that we face every day are denture teeth chip and break and pop off. A patient can't chew well with the new denture. And that's an interesting one because typically they'll come and they say, well, it's just not working. Well, can you describe that for me? I just can't eat. Well, can you describe that for me? It just doesn't mesh. It doesn't work. And you have to keep in mind the chew cycle of a patient, and what it's supposed to do is that our teeth are there to chew food and mince it. And then our mouth is there to roll it into a ball called a bolus, and then we swallow that ball. So the process of our teeth is there to mince food, get it into a ball that's mixed with saliva so that our esophagus can swallow that ball into our stomach. So when they say they can't eat, then they're having problem mincing the food. It's not getting into the ball that it should. Certainly the new denture is more loose than the old set. That plagued me for the first little while of my career of patients saying to me, how come the new one is looser than the old one? That's always a fun conversation to have with people. Multiple relines with no success, and again you relined it and you think that it's correct and your extensions are correct. Denture brace breaks. Food collects under the denture, but it just doesn't need to be relined because the extensions are right and there's a good fit, but it's collecting under during the chew cycle. And the new denture feels too big. You get soreness. So these are some of the common things that we face every day clinically. These can be a problem because, again, you have to appreciate that these build up over time. We build the denture, go through the process, and then on average, a patient is back 2 to 5 times for an adjustment regarding dentures. And so then we hear these types of complaints repetitively in our workday, whether it's vis-a-vis the patient or through the dentist, that we get these repetitive problems. And these common issues do cause us stress. And that stress over time leads to burnout. You have to think of this collectively over time, that when we deal with these types of denture issues, it leads to burnout over time. In 2019, the World Health Organization has now listed and classified burnout as a disease. Specifically, burnout is categorized as feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism. And this was a very key point for me when I read this. When you go to get together with like-minded colleagues at conventions and such, it's interesting when you hear some of the cynicism, and especially from a denture perspective. We talk about our crazy patients and patients that are unrealistic, and these types of things where we categorize the person as being difficult because we just don't know how to solve their, the complaints or the issues. And so then we get cynical on it. And if you take I took a hard look at myself to say, geez, am I being cynical? And are my comments or my thought processes being cynical to people? And the answer was yes, it happens very quickly. So that's a big thing to watch for as a trigger point. in yourself, reduced professional efficiency, and disruptive sleep patterns can categorize yourself as being burned out. So I'm focusing on a denture specific relation here, in your life of the, the stresses that you deal with every day from a denture perspective. A major sign of burnout is if you go on a holiday, even a long weekend, you come back and after a few days at work, it feels like you've never had that holiday and you're tired all over again. Well, my dear colleagues, you're suffering from burnout. And this is something that I wanted to share with you to say I made that recognition in myself to say, okay, yeah, these things are happening, but now what are we going to do about it? And so began my journey to say, okay, how many adjustments am I doing? What kind of adjustments am I doing? What are the major complaints that I hear from patients? Now, what can I do to take control of that? So the first thing was an understanding of freedom and centric. So freedom and centric is a flat area in the central fossa, typically lower, but they're found also in the upper, of where an opposing cusp comes into contact, yet permits a degree of freedom in eccentric movements, uninfluenced by a tooth incline, which means there's no working and balancing contact yet. The tooth can hang around in that central fossa unrestricted and move around from side to side. And that's freedom, and freedom, everyone, is good. So the real life example is when you try to touch your own teeth together and you put them gently and lightly into centric, and then you try to wiggle them side to side and front to back before you go into eccentric movements. So let's try that. You touch your teeth together, and now you're trying to wiggle them gently side to side, front to back, while in light centric. There is a degree of a little bit of freedom there, and that freedom is freedom in centric, and that freedom is good. Why is this important? Because it allows us that ability when we close into centric to close in uninfluenced by a tooth incline. So what does that mean? That means when you close into centric, you can close your mouth, because remember now we don't close straight open and shut like a hinge. We don't want the hit and slide on the guiding planes. So in terms of looking at the left-hand side of the right-hand side of the screen, we don't want to hit and slide into position. Now with natural teeth, our natural teeth have nerves, and we have proprioception, and we can feel our teeth come together. And if they're coming together incorrectly, our brain can make the necessary input movements to alter that so that we don't break teeth. Now you have to keep in mind, from a denture patient, there's no nerve into the denture teeth. They can't feel their denture teeth touch. So if they hit and slide into position, they don't know. They can't tell you that. So they've lost a really big proprioception of terms of how accurate their bite is and how accurate their bite is when they're eating. Because essentially you have to think of a denture patient eating without being able to feel their teeth. It's like walking without being able to feel your feet, using your hands without being able to feel your hands. So now they're trying to eat without feeling their teeth. So we have to give them more tolerances, because denture teeth are locked together. So what does that mean is that we expect and set up denture teeth in the lab to open and close bullseye every time. Our articulator holds everything together. We line up centric. We get that thing bullseyed every time, and then we expect a patient to be able to bullseye that every time. Now we're expecting a denture patient to bullseye land that when they can't feel their teeth touch. And now we're expecting a senior citizen, because most of our patients who have dentures are senior citizens that have degraded neuromuscular abilities, degraded health, etc., to land in and bite in centric each and every time. So then we expect that from them. Most denture teeth on the market, my dear colleagues, are locked together in centric, which means when you hold them together in centric, there's no movement because it's locked physically. Yes, it'll go right to working and balancing, but now what happens is we set that up again in the lab and go, look, it's perfect. I have working and balancing. Everything is shimmed correctly. It's great. And then we expect it to work like that in the mouth, in a living organism that is anything but perfect. And that's where the discrepancy comes. So what happens is the hit and slide causes us the problem. So then the teeth are hitting, sliding into position, and that's what causes the main problem of the cause of the problem. Pardon me. So we have to think of it from the perspective of they're trying to eat. There's a hit and slide that'll cause the break, the chips, that causes the denture to dislodge. Food gets underneath it, ill fit, etc. So we have to remember that it's not possible for a patient to close into centric accurately every time. And yet we set up teeth to do that. And so part of this was an acknowledgement on myself to say, geez, Mark, you set up teeth and you're using teeth that have no freedom in centric, set it up, yes, with working and balancing, but they still have to bullseye land that centric. And that's not possible to do when you stick food in your mouth. So we set it up on an articulator without food, and everything is nice and perfect in a controlled environment in the lab. Yet now you go out into the quote unquote real world, put this into a person to function, and now they've got a hot dog on one side. And there's food in the middle that the teeth are trying to cut through and mince. It's not accurate. And so then what happens is it hits and slides. So the red arrows show that it'll hit and then it'll slide into position. And the slide is what then manipulates the denture base and causes the problems. So again, you get the sores, you get the rubbing from the friction that causes the sores, you get the food underneath it, you get the breakage. These things are caused by a locked in bite. So this was something then that I acknowledged myself to say, okay, this is happening in the mouth. What am I going to do to control it? So this is a video now of, if you look at it, you can see that there's working and balancing here. So I've got working and balancing, but now I'm going to do the little wiggle in the middle. And the little wiggle is the freedom, and freedom is good. So now I've got teeth, and I'm going to use the theory and principles in an upper denture to natural dentition. This is, of course, an upper lower, but it's to show you what it looks like. So it's to show you that cusp wiggling around in the fossa, and that it permits a degree of freedom. So I call it a helicopter pad. You're giving a patient a helicopter pad to land in, theoretically, before there's they go through their chew cycle, or before there's working and balancing contacts. So it permits a degree of freedom. What you're trying to do by having that helicopter pad is that the teeth don't hit and slide into position. They're not so tightly together or bound together that they hit and slide into position. You have that little helicopter pad for them to land in. So I'm talking to you now about the next phase of my journey, which was an understanding of a chew cycle. So this is a video from the University of Strasbourg. So it's fantastic. This is a patient chewing. So this is with natural dentition. I want you to look at the chew cycle of the jaw. So you see how it comes in at an angle? So they're chewing an apple. So our chew cycle is defined by a teardrop pattern. And when we're eating, we come in and we chew in a teardrop pattern. And you can see that the jaw's coming in at quite an angle. So if you hit and slide into position, working and balancing occlusion would dictate that you better be hitting and sliding bilaterally equally at the same time, which is not possible. And you can see even here with gum, look at that. It's not locked in. You can see there's that helicopter pad, the teeth actually touch together. They shimmy a little bit, and then it opens again. So when someone says to me, Mark, my bite's right, and then they take their fingers and they touch them up and down, we're not chewing like a hinge. So take a look at this patient. This is awesome. Take a look at this chew cycle. You see how it's more? See the difference? You see how this one is more vertical, where the other cycles have been more horizontal. So what this video shows us is that everyone has a chew cycle. and everyone has a unique chew cycle to them. So it's like your fingerprint, it's like your eye retina scan. And some of the cycles are flatter, some are oval, circular, some are ovoid, some are teardrop. So I've categorized them into sort of 4 groups, and they can be anywhere in between as well. But it does give us an idea to try and categorize it so that when I set up teeth now, I'm gonna set up teeth within that chew cycle so that the guiding planes don't interfere while that patient is chewing in that chew cycle. So the guiding planes now are circled in black. I'm trying to make sure that those don't interfere while the patient is going through their chew cycle. So we don't want those red interference lines where it would run into position of hit and slide. So we have freedom and centric, but then we also have trying to set things within that chew cycle of that patient. So this is a video of a patient of mine, just to show you a chew cycle. This is a denture patient. It's an upper and lower denture patient. And we use words during try-ins to look at the aesthetical value. So we use words like 66, Mississippi, days of the week, months of the year, etc. So I'm going to run the video. So we typically look at the aesthetical value of the teeth. So we look at midline, smile line, cuspid lines. We're looking at how it looks aesthetically. But what I started to realize was, geez, you can look at the phonetical of what the jaw's doing, posturing to pronounce the words. So now when you take a look at the video again, and you can actually see her jaw move, and especially near the end of the cycle of her saying 66 here, look at, you see how it swings out to the left? See that? Look at the lower midline. You see how it swings out to her left, our right? So when you have a patient come to you and they say, geez, my dentures get loose after I talk. And then we would always look at the extensions, and we'd look at centric and my post-stem. And you know what it is? It was the teeth hitting, and the teeth hitting while they were speaking. But because they can't feel them hit, because there's no nerve to the teeth, they can't tell you they're hitting. All they can tell you is that they come loose after a while. Well, that's why, because now the guiding planes were hitting and knocking it out. Sometimes you can hear it, especially if a patient says, yeah, my wife says my teeth clack. Well, that's what's going on. We now have an issue with how the teeth are functioning within that chew cycle. And so this patient was complaining to me of her teeth coming out. So then when I examined and did these types of protocols to identify how her jaw was moving, then I could identify to say, oh, wait a minute, I have an interference problem here on the left side. So here's another patient. Now to get to identify posturing, I have the patient typically say days of the week and months of the year in English and their natural mother language. The reason being is the phonetics of a language are held usually within the days of the week and the months of the year. So the A, E, I, O, U's, those types of phonetics that are the building blocks of a language are covered within days of the weeks and months of the year in that language. So what I'm trying to do is to watch the jaw posture. So take a look at this. Look at it move. Look at that thing. Let's play it again, Sam. So now I know things are moving around. So this is what I built for her. I built her an upper and lower denture, but look, I buried, I have what, 6, 7 millimeters of overbite. I'm building dentures now that I never thought I could do and build, yet I'm able to do that because I have the ability to now work within that chew cycle. I have identified a chew cycle. I can have freedom in centric. So now that I know the parameters of how the jaw usually works within, I can set teeth within that and make it work for them. So it's interesting that I have this type of an arrangement set up where I have basically 6 or 7 millimeters of overbite, yet it doesn't look like that when she speaks. So that was an eye opener for me, is that we typically have set teeth just with a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-2 ratio. So long as I clear things out and work within their chew cycle, so the yellow arrows here on the second, on the laterals here, that dictates that I've given a little more room in that area for her to swing and posture out to that side. So just as we wrap up the chew cycles, I've colored the teeth on the lower teeth of this patient. She's actually not a patient. She was at one of our courses once. So she graciously let me color her teeth. And then she said 66. But again, watch her jaw swing. Can you see it move? So you have to keep in mind, I mean, she's got a big overbite. Her teeth have character to them. Yet when she talks, they're not hitting, they're not fracturing, because of course she can feel the system is receiving that biofeedback, so that it's working within that system and functions for her and her skeletal and muscular system. We have to take that now to a denture perspective of, we want teeth to set into that system as well. Okay, and our last video here is that this is a complete upper denture to a lower partial free end extension denture. So this is now having the patient chew. Look at that. So now that's dentures. And again, those chew cycles are there. They don't go away. So a chew cycle influences tooth interaction. And now we need to modify teeth within that chew cycle, whether you do that traditional or digital. So this video, I'm going to tip my hand a little bit. This is what we typically do. So we set it up and we go through working and balancing. So this is what we would typically do for a complete upper denture, complete lower denture, etc. So we do working and balancing occlusion. And that's how we move the articulator. So that's kind of how we're taught and how we check things. Okay. So what I'm going to show you today, is what we want to do is the same. Okay. So what we typically were doing there was setting it up, working and balancing occlusion, so that you have to think of it, pardon me, bilaterally. And that thought was that the teeth then are going to land and function and provide that stability. And that's where the whole concept of working and balancing occlusion came up. Trouble is that when they designed the teeth, they forgot to put in freedom and centric in that. They locked it in. And now you have to think that there's going to be food, again, like a hot dog on one side or the other. And now there's food in between the teeth, which is going to impair that ability to work and balance. And then as you saw in the chew videos, does anybody chew like, excuse me, on the chew videos now that I showed you, does anyone even function like this, like we do and check in on an articulator? So the answer for me was no. And this is what I do now with an articulator. I move the articulator in reference to a possible chew cycle of that patient. Whether I know it or not, whether I've identified it or not, you can now start to move an articulator. Doesn't matter what kind of articulator you have, even if it's a hinge articulator, it doesn't matter. You can now move things and move more to a chew cycle of a patient or what you think it to be. And that's now going to give you a more detailed and a more accurate example of how it's going to function in the mouth. What you're trying to do then, and here's a close-up of it, what you're trying to do is identify the, again, hit and slide zones. So you're just trying to get it so that the cusp goes into the fossa. You're trying to get it so that the guiding planes don't hit on some kind of a chew cycle for that patient. So the rule of thumb for me is the more elderly they are, the more frail they are, the more horizontal the pattern's going to get, because their muscles aren't firing as accurately and as crisply as they used to. So now the chew cycle goes flatter. So I wanted to show you this because that's what we're going to do when we do our hands-on portion here, is to show you that we have to get away from moving the articulator in our old manners and start moving it more in conjunction with what a patient is doing. Because remember, we don't chew in centric. All right. So that is the beginning and end point, but not, you don't chew there. So as I wrap up here, the PowerPoint portion of the program, we wanted to, and my goal is to further that relationship with you and ergo with, and that with VITA North America and you. So if you have questions, you have to please advise us, myself or VITA North America and the help desk. Jim and Paul are there to again help and support you, because we want you and we want to amp up the ability to be a superhero to your patients. Because whether you're on the bench or whether you're seeing them directly, there's a patient there and you're trying to be a superhero for that patient. And whether you send that through the doctor that puts it in the mouth, you're the one putting the teeth together. Okay, these are the reps. So again, Jim will show this later on as well, but these are the sales reps that are available for VITA North America as well in your zones. And this is about being a superhero to, again, your patients, but also to yourself, and to gain a better understanding and control of a better understanding, a better understanding and control of the daily problems, that we face clinically when dealing with a patient. It can add up and it can be problematic for us. So as I just switch over to the camera here, I just ask for your patience. What we're trying to do is to, again, get a better control and an understanding from someone to see when they say, well, I'm having these problems, and we're trying I'm trying to help manage it better and get a better grip on it so that I can deal with it on the front end versus on the back end. So what does that mean is I want to try to deal with this right away when I build the denture and not afterwards when it's an adjustment. Because when you stand in front of a patient, and let's face it, a senior citizen, and you're trying to give an accounting for why there's a problem, it sounds like an excuse. If you can hit that on the front end and say, this is what's going on, these are what we can expect, and if that does actually materialize, then boy, you look credible, and you can say, look, we braced for this problem, we knew this was going to happen. So typically now, as we switch over and we build an upper denture to lower natural dentition, lower natural dentition shows up to us in all kinds of ways, shapes, and forms. It's all over the place. Yet we have to try and set denture teeth to function against this, and to make it work. And it's a challenging job when we have these different types of situations that we're trying to build a denture that has some uniformity to it, when anything is and anything is but uniform in these types of situations. So I have a bunch of examples here that I articulated, and we're going to pick on a couple models here. Typically what we do when we again set teeth is we take the upper denture tooth and we just grind it and we just get her into position. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a different mindset on that. So this is more at the moment an upper and lower. So remember, we have that freedom and centric. So that's in the fossa here, so that this can move forward and back and side to side. And then, so that's freedom and centric. And then now in standard working and balancing, so we have the case so that it can balance. So again, that's fine. But now what I'm saying is now we want to make sure that when the jaw moves and we're going through the chew cycle, that it doesn't hit and then slide into position, because again, the patient can't tell you that. And the hit and slide causes our grief. It causes the breakage and the cracking. And 9 times out of 10, it's always an occlusion related issue. And this is where, again, when people say, oh yeah, Mark, my bite's right, and we'll do this. But remember, you don't chew like this. You chew in a teardrop. So the problem isn't the end point. Oh yeah, my bite's right. Oh yeah, my centric line's up. Yeah, but they don't chew in centric. When they come through on the very final motion, now it's going to hit and slide into position. And that's when the patient says, I can't eat. What do you mean you can't eat? I can't eat. It doesn't work. What doesn't work? It just doesn't work. It doesn't function. And the patient sometimes is frustrated and can't find the words for you other than they say to you, it just doesn't work. Because again, they don't realize that they're trying to mince food into a ball and swallow it. We as the technicians and as the direct care providers that see patients, we're the ones that understand and realize that the job of this is to take food and it's to mince it and mash it, okay, into a ball that gets swallowed. That's the idea. So now when we have a chew cycle, we can go in and we're watching to make sure that we don't hit and slide on the guide planes, okay, because that's the issue. Now, typically, again, when we go through and we make a upper denture, I was taught you get out articulating paper and you just start grinding that tooth in and you get it so that it fits. Fits means it was knuckle tight. And what I realized is I used to take those teeth and I'd make them knuckle tight, and I would make them fit against this surface so that there was no gapping or anything. And that's wrong. And that was hard for me because I was taught that you take those teeth and you make them and you grind them in, and that's going to work. The trouble is that then you are giving someone with a flat surface against a flat surface, so there's no chewing or tread where to chew the food. So that was issue number 1. And issue number 2 is if you make this tight, so if you make the opposing occlusion tight against this, where does the food go when it closes in and starts to chew through the food and the teeth come into contact? If everything is so tight and you bite into it, the food gets pushed off the teeth because there's no gapping there. You actually need to maintain gapping so that the food stays on the teeth. So that led me down now through this journey. We'll get the light back on and I'm going to snuggle in close. That led me through now to try and identify the actual shape of the teeth that I'm working against. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see, look, can you see there's a little bit of a, there is a little bit of a U there. There is a little bit of a bowl, okay? So the job of this tooth is to hold the food and bring it up to the opposing upper to get crushed. That's this tooth's job. What's nice is I have a little bit of a bowl to work in so that I can center then a cusp within that bowl to act as the mortar and pestle. So now what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to take that lower tooth and have the upper cusp. So this hammers into the bowl, okay, like a mortar and pestle. So I'm going to take my fist and it's going to come in like this. And the idea is that it hammers and minces the food. This type of mindset, I struggled with during the first parts of my career. I had to realize that denture teeth are there not to mill food. They're there to crush food. So one of the biggest complaints that we would often receive clinically is patients say, I can't eat lettuce. So I'm sure some of you are chuckling out there because if we had $1 for every time someone said to me or said to us, we can't eat lettuce, it was so much so that I looked up lettuce and how it was made and the cell structure. And I mean, so yeah, a little bit of my, obsessive compulsive disorder kicked in, and I was trying to figure this out. And what I realized is that when we would set teeth, and regardless of whether this is on an upper and lower or just even on an upper denture, so the first problem is that we were trying to set teeth up to have them mill. And as you saw by the chew cycles, people don't mill their food. They go through a cycle and it gets hammered in and it's mincing it. So you need to have a bowl, and then you need to have the upper tooth and the upper cusp come in, and it hammers it. So it's like a mortar and pestle. Okay, you have, and then it comes in and the lower holds it, and then the upper comes in and smashes it. And when I started to follow that, I've eliminated the problem of patients complaining about eating lettuce, because now they hammer the lettuce. So the idea behind this was outlining on the tooth. Okay, I have a little bit of a bowl here. Now this tooth, the first molar, you can see there is nothing there. So there's no bowl there. The whole thing's worn off at an angle, and an angle, a negative angle of where it should be anyway. So this is where it becomes a little bit challenging. There's a few things that I do try to do. Is I still am going to try to center my contact points here so that I have a cusp coming in here. I'm going to have it so that at least I have a little bit of contact and a stop. I want some spacing there. But the idea then is that the upper still overlaps, and I'll get to that later, and it's not knuckle tight. So as I go through the teeth, I try to kind of pinpoint where the little crevices are and where those little bowls are, okay, as I call them, okay, so that the cusps will nestle into the tooth. So as I grab a denture tooth, then let's take a lingo form here. We're going to just use a 20. Let's use a. Here we have a 22L for the first. So the thought process is to come in here. So the idea is then I'm going to be looking to reference that lingual cusp in that little bowl that I've outlined in pencil, and then I'm going to just slowly again tap that in on the articulator to get that a little bit better, so it's again not as pinpointed. So I'm going to be wearing down this cusp tip as it goes into the fossa. So I'm going to do that on purpose to get better, more adapted contact to that specific tooth. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to maintain, and I'm going to try to hold it so you can see, I'm going to maintain this overlap. So this was critical for me as a learning curve to say, I want to maintain this overlap over the tooth. And as we subsequently move down the line, I want to maintain that overlap with the other subsequent teeth. The reason being is when you, again, go back and look at the chew cycle videos, okay, you will have someone, let's refocus that. Here's the lower, and then the upper comes in, and then it overlaps. And what does this do? This is overlapping. This is helping hold the food up. So that's what helps hold the food in. If you saw it off like we typically would, then the food comes in and it just gets squirted and pushed off the teeth. You don't want that. You don't want the food just to come straight off and move. We want this, as I'm running out of colors, we want this overlap here, okay? That becomes really important to help hold the food on the lower, regardless of how good or poor the shape of the lower is. We want that overlap here. So we don't want the dentition knuckle tight. I want that overlap coming through. And that was, again, when I started to look at the chew cycles of how it was progressing in the real anatomy and in the real patients, those videos became a real learning curve for me to say, okay, how am I going to alter this and change this to make it work for them? So a couple points that I want to address is one, I can see the patient clinically, so I can identify what kind of chew cycle they have. So I have that benefit. As a technician on the workbench, you don't. But now I want you to realize that one exists, and you have to start to think, okay, how am I going to work with that? Because there is one. Again, now I've said, I've stopped, again, using this type of motion on an articulator in favor of a chew cycle motion of what I'm going to see. And then that lets me see, again, the cycle. And you're going to guess the cycle. If you can't identify it yourself, then I want you to make an educated guess. So the educated guess is, do you have any information about the patient? Do you know how old they are, how many dentures they had, or the condition of the old denture, that's being replaced? These things can help you make an educated decision as to what that chew cycle will be for someone when you don't have that information presented to you. So I'm going to heat some things up and get some wax going here, and we're going to set that tooth into position here. So we're going to set the first premolar into position. So again, what we would typically do is we would set the tooth in. I would bring it down into occlusion, something like this, trying to get it into position. So we'll shoot there, say, okay. And then I would take my handy dandy articulating paper and I would do this and I would tap it in, and then I would take usually a nice big burr, and start grinding the tooth away, and closing that in so that it was nice and tight. Okay, so that's not what I'm going to do. So what's the mark way? Well, what I do now is I work with pens. So this is a Statler non-permanent Lumicolor. You can also use Sharpies, non-permanent, etc. I don't use articulating paper directly really on the teeth anymore because the paper bends and you can get an erroneous reading. So the paper bends and it's not good. So what my main goal is, this cusp, so that chew cusp. And then what I want to do is I want to start to bring it down into position. Okay, so sorry as I try to hold everything for the camera. And then you can start to see now what I'm going to get is I'm going to get some red marking here. Okay, and it's going to show me where things are rolling. So I've done this this method where I've colored the cusp, and then I'm looking to see it hit into the fossa. And then I've also done it this way, and I'll just allow me a minute to just clean everything off and show you this method. This now seems to be my more preferred way as I've kind of gone through and changed things, is I'm going to take this and I'm going to color the surface area of the tooth. Okay. And then I'm going to place the denture tooth into position. And now I'm going to close in and tap. And then what's going to happen is that you'll see, okay, so let me just focus. And let me just turn the light off. Let's see. No, that doesn't work as good. Let me do one setting on the light. Okay. You can see just now, right there, there's the dot. So the color transferred over right here. Okay. So now that cusp is resting into that fossa. And then even on the model, I'll be able to see it. It's right there. Okay. So it's just touching. So now I can take a burr. So I can use just a diamond or a rubber wheel to now start to soften and flatten out the cusp. So this is now one of the key advantages of linguiform teeth. This is acrylic glass. I can take acrylic glass and I can grind it and reshape it, and I do not have to touch it or polish it afterwards. And that is a great saver for me, not to have to do it because the glass self-polishes. So the material is a benefit to me because I don't have to repolish it after it's done. So I can either use a nice fine rubber wheel or like I said, a diamond, something that's nice and fine. And I go in and so I will touch the tooth into position while I colored it, and then the colors are transposing onto the tooth. Whoops, sorry. The colors are transposing onto the tooth right there. And then I can further take so now I'm customizing the upper cusp into the shape of the fossa on the bottom, yet leaving, look, gapping. So let me again refocus so that there, you can see that there's, let me just get the pencil right in there. There's some spacing right in there. That's good. So the food stays on there. And then you can see the cusp overlaps. This overlaps. So I'm going to turn it so you can see it so that it overlaps. To help, again, hold the food onto the food table, onto the lower, because it's the lower's job to bring the food to the upper to get crushed. So it's just a rethink of again, the setting of the teeth. So it's just not an arbitrary, get this as tight as possible, as quick as possible. It's, I need to work within freedom and centric. I need to work within the chew cycle. And I need to remember that the job here is to take the food, bring it up and get crushed so that it can get minced and rolled into a ball and swallowed. And this may not be ideal, okay? It may not be the best bowl to hold all the food up in a great manner, but I got to work with it. So that's now the goal. So now I can take, and you can see now I've got those two on the second premolar or on the second bicuspid area, and that's my next tooth to go in. So I have a little bit of a nicer, couple nice little bit more defined bowls to work with, and I can go in and set the second into position, close it in, and now look for the mark. See that? Okay, so let me grind that. Okay, Jim.
Yes.
Do we have any questions?
We have a few. How do you explain to a dentist that a 10-degree tooth may not be needed and that a possible tooth with a larger degree of teeth may work just as well.
Yeah. So
So I think it comes down to, you know, hey, the old school thinking, or I need a certain degree of tooth.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So
from a technician perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to speak holistically because every situation is different. So I apologize. Let me just quickly touch on that. Number one, to me now, it has nothing to do about degrees of teeth. It has to do with that chew cycle and how it's going to function for that patient. Remember, end goal, mince it, roll it into a ball, and swallow it. So that was rule number one. Rule number two is now, especially on uppers to lower natural dentition, because every tooth is different, I'm trying to take that lingual cusp and get it into the shape of that bowl on the bottom, however that bowl is shaped, try to get it in the best shape as I can, and customize it in. The third thing about specifically degree of teeth is this. I had to rethink personally the degrees of teeth. And what I've realized is it's not about the degrees of teeth. So in my rationale, pardon me, for me, everybody, that little old lady, any type of even a flat type of chew cycle gets lingual-form teeth because I want the lower to bring the food up against the upper antagonist cusp, and I want it to crush. And then it wants to crush within whatever type of chew cycle is there. Okay. So now I apologize. My phone is going off. Let me just make sure. Nope. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't somebody trying to text me something that they had a question. So it is now that matters. So you need to have the freedom in centric so that you can have cusped teeth, but cusped teeth will work for someone when you have that helicopter pad to land in, because then they're not hitting and sliding into position. Then the teeth are there to hold the food and get it crushed and then mince the food so that, and then within that chew cycle, and then I don't have the issues of the guiding planes hitting and contacting. So it's a little bit of a rethink, and you have to sort of let go of that 20-degree working and balancing mentality, or the 10-degree or functional degree teeth when ridges weren't good. To me now, it doesn't matter about the ridge. It matters about the patient, and I need to reestablish the mince pattern, the chew pattern for them. So it took a while. I'm at year 35. I started rethinking myself about 5 years into this. So I was 5 years into it. So I was like 20, 25. And again, I was having these problems, and I'm like, what am I missing? And so began my journey. And it took a while to let go of things. That it's not about the degree of teeth. I need to give them a nice sharp tooth, but working within the parameters. So not make the teeth flatter just because they have a flatter chew cycle. It's just I need to now, again, give them a little more freedom. So the whole idea behind this is I can grind the guiding planes of the teeth to make it work within the chew cycle of the person whilst maintaining a nice bowl and a nice cusp so that they can mince. And that's what gets through the lettuce. That's what gets through the issues. And I hope that answers your question. As I said, a little bit on the holistical side, I have to kind of speak in overtones because every situation is different. How do you approach that to the doctor is when they're not busy, because again, you're asking someone to drive on the other side of the road. They need a minute to process what you're thinking and to understand it. And sometimes you have to follow it up, like I've done today with videos and chew videos, and say, look, this is why I'm changing and why my rationale goes this way. Okay, so thank you for that great question. Right. Jim?
Yeah, are you ready for more? Or
yeah, if we have another one, I'll just I'll keep working. And we can, because I just wanted to tackle it, Jim, in case there was any questions about the occlusion as I'm going. Hence the, but yes, next question.
So on a class 2, is there an amount of overbite that can be corrected that the patient can tolerate?
Okay, so that's another good question. So on a class 2, is there amount of overbite? Again, it's gonna come down to the patient and how their skeletal system and muscular system works for them. They're a class 2, and Lady Gaga said it, baby, you were born this way. And so you need to determine how much space they have and the room. Can there be a little bit of correction? Yeah, I can shorten things, and sure, I can, squeak it. We all know we can try to wing things a little bit, but at the end of the day, the answer is sometimes not that much. So I apologize, because it's not a set forth straight answer. What you're going to hear from me as I move forward is this is all about trying to customize it to the person and customizing it for them. So the real soft sell or the growth for me was trying to understand the person I was building this for, and not the textbook, which just said everyone should fall within this parameter and this mold and done. No. And that's what you see, is that there's a lot of give and take and a lot of flexibility, and I need to use teeth and product that allow me to change them and be flexible with them. And that's why I've migrated to this, again, to lingo form and such, because now what I'm trying to do is make the teeth for them. I'm trying to work it for them. So when you ask me, how much can we change, Mark? Well, again, that's going to depend on the patient and what you think you can get away with. So yes, this is always a little bit of discrepancy as a direct care provider about what I'm going to do. But at the end of the day, they're a class 2. They have an overbite and in an overjet, and it kind of is the old expression, it is what it is, and we work within it. But now I'm not scared by it, because I can have freedom in centric. I can have my freedom and my wiggle room and my helicopter pad, that I can set these things up, not be scared of them, and I know it's going to function, because that's how it's going to function for them. So what I'm trying to do is to, again, I'm just the vessel. I'm just the conductor. I'm not trying to teach anybody in the orchestra how to play, because they have a job at an orchestra. They know how to play. My job is just to carry forth with my vision of how I see the music unfold, and they know how to play their parts. I'm there just to keep them going. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to take my knowledge and take teeth and mold them into the person, and I make it for them, if that makes sense, everyone. Again, it's a departure from what we're typically used to doing, from again, that, I hate to use the word, but the cookie cutter, no, it's got to be 20 degree. And now I've let go of that, and I've tried to say, what am I going to do? How am I molding this to the person? Okay, Jim, next question.
The question is, do you always start your setup using the first buy?
I'm sorry. Say that again. Do I always start my setup?
Do you always start your setup with the first buy, second buy?
Yes, pretty typical-ish. For today's, because I wanted to concentrate more on the posterior teeth, I didn't start with anterior. So yeah, I usually try to start in around the molar area and then work forward. So I try to start on the first molar, because that's the main chewing tooth. That's where most of the food goes. That's the biggest bowl. So that's why I'm concerned most about that. But what I wanted to do is to take it from here and work my way back today, just to kind of get you used to my mentality and my thinking of why I do it. And then you can, again, modify that to your needs in the lab. I hope that answers that question. Okay, so again,
yeah,
here,
no,
again, we've got the overlap. I've got spacing as I move forward, and now I'm going to carry over to the molar. And then again, this kind of funky tooth here. So before I take the next question, Jim, now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to increase the size, because you can see this is a lot wider. So I've been using a 22. Now I'm going to switch out and I'm going to go to a larger tooth, and I'm actually going to go to a 24. Because this is wider, I'm going to switch and I'm going to go to a wider posterior on it to help match. Sorry for trying to hold to the camera. And I'm going to try to match sizing better than what the other mold was going to give me. The other mold's a little bit too narrow. So the way that you can see that the tooth was shaped, that these lingual cusps, they're going to slide down the ramp. So now I'm going to slowly tap these in and get a better contact in there, knowing now that most of the chewing is going to be occurring on this tooth, because that's where it holistically does. Okay, Jim, next question as I carry on.
All right, so you spurred a question. So if the opposing molar is wider and you select a wider tooth mold for the molar,
Yes.
do you follow with the bicuspids, or do you stick with the smaller?
Stick with what works. Stick with the original, because you could see that these bicuspids were in rough size to this, and it worked. They're okay. I'm switching sizes because this was flatter and then hence wider, and so now I'm customizing it down into a wider tooth. So typically I'll jump over and use whatever's necessary to make it work against the antagonist, whatever's required. So you can see on this side, there's not as much of a jump on this side. Let me hit refocus here. Let me turn the light on so maybe you can see it a little easier. See how that tooth is, it's a little bit, it follows in line. So I'm probably not going to be switching because I don't have to, because this one isn't as wide. But because this one has widened out, I'm going to then use a wider one to get better contact, knowing why, knowing that I have such a poor slope here and a very poor bowl to work in, that I'm going to try and again get a little bit of a wider tooth to help hold the food on a little better, help the process of chewing a little bit better. Again, what's the mindset? Mince, form a ball, swallow the ball, and work within the chew cycle of a patient. Okay, Jim, is there another question, or we'll just keep going forward?
No, I just keep going.
Okay. Okay, so now I'm tapping in. Whoops, get to the camera. And now you can see there's that nice pinpoint touch. So that's this touching, right? You can even see where it got moved away. So I know exactly where it is. So I love using these things, using the pens. Okay. So now I'm going to customize this. And then, of course, you have to keep in mind that you have to, as we're doing this, you're going to have to heat it and slide it into position as I'm altering it now to the specifics of this. So this tooth actually has quite a bit of grinding to do on it. So the idea is I'm going to be having these lingual cusps touch down into the flat but bowl area of this lower. Okay, it's not the best, as we saw when we started, it's not the best bowl area to work with. Okay, but I'm trying to then dumb down the cusps to get a little bit more of a flatter contact against them. But again, maintaining that I'm going to be working within that chew cycle, and I want that overlap here, maintained to help hold the food. Because the tooth is slanted, the food's going to want to glance off of it. So I'm going to want those cusps coming down to help hold the food on to facilitate that mince. So all my key decisions are always made on we're here to mince the food, roll it in a ball, and swallow it. That's how it should work. Now, how am I going to make that work on this? How am I making that work on that patient's perceived chew cycle? So as everything kind of comes down in together, I'm going to seal it. So it's kind of hard to tell on the camera, so I apologize. So number one, you can see that there's some gapping in here. But what's happening now is you can see that lingual cusp back here is nowhere near as prominent as it was before. It's dumbing down now and resting in to that slope. So let me try to, there we go. So again, that's resting in here, okay? And so we're starting to get some nice contact in there as I'm customizing it to the shape of this lower molar. And then what's good is from this profile view, you can see that the cusps are overhanging, and there's I've got it so that the cusps are there to kind of hold the food on. But when you look at it, I don't have the tooth tipped, because typically what we would see is when a tooth is shaped like that, and say a lower is shaped like this, and then we take the upper denture tooth and we would grind it, well, we shape it like that. But where's the directional force? See, the directional force is going this way. Where's the ridge? Well, the ridge is up here. You want the directional force going into. So that's one of the other reasons now for this type of approach is I want most of the main contact here on the tooth, on these spots here, which is directly over the ridge, so that the ridge is absorbing the pressure, not having it contact out here, which then is flexing and then torques the plate and then causes it to break. So part of this is, again, finding the bowl and then working the cusp into the bowl with the buccal cusp overhanging, maintains the tooth in a proper direction so that the forces go up into the ridge and are absorbed and supported by the ridge, not the sulcus. And that was a big thing, again, for me as through my growth and growth cycle as a practitioner, to become aware of the directional force of the tooth. So that's why I'm grinding it down from the lingual so that all the directional force goes into the ridge as well. So that's going to aid in the stability of the denture, and again, the comfort of the denture, but then the efficiency of the denture.
So Mark,
yes.
Quick question. So if it was a cross bite case,
yes,
you would just flatten the buccal cusp.
Yeah. Yeah. And here, let's do the last one, crossbite. Let's do this one. Let's pretend. Yeah. So then it's just the buccal. So then what happens is because it's a crossbite case. So now I'm going to take this. So I'll just, what did I grab? I grab a 24. So it's pretty big. Okay. So now these are going to be my cutters, right? Not this, not this. These are going to be what I'm going to be looking for to line up directionally here, okay? And then the lingual will swing down. So a lot of times I'm going to have to grind this free, that guiding plane, because it's gonna knock right in this area, okay? But again, that's a great question, and you're right on the money. So again, see how I'm just going to come in. So again, it's just that buccal cusp coming down. And then if you flip it, and let me just go dorsal here. Okay, so it's not quite into position because I still have to grind it, but let's just say we tip that down a little bit. And then the lingual is just overhanging, and that's fine because then the linguals help holding the food. So again, from a crossbite perspective, that's exactly what you do. And then it's just the buccal. So now I would be grinding these buccal cusps down a little bit to fit into that bowl here of that. So it's correct. Okay. Question?
All right. So
then, like I said,
after you grind your teeth, do you process and then buff out after you've processed the denture, or do you polish the occlusion before processing?
I don't polish at all because it's acrylic glass, and because I'm using a diamond or a rubber wheel, I don't polish. It'll get a high shine, and that's it. No pumice. So it's just a high shine on that, okay? And that's everything, okay? So just high shine. Because it's acrylic glass, it'll self-polish, okay?
And you're using a carbide or a diamond?
A diamond or a rubber wheel. So this is a diamond for today, but I also have rubber wheels, different kinds of that. So look, it's in your own little tickle trunk of what you want to use. But no, I do not have to polish this at all. Okay, so okay. Next question, Jim, because then I'll switch gears here.
So yeah, now go ahead, and then I'll do your next subject.
All right. So I want to put some anterior teeth onto this case now. So again, the mindset, just a quick review, everyone, was number one, I try and I'm trying to identify what kind of bowl I have, and then where I'm going to position that upper lingual cusp. So the buccal, lingual buccal, lingual mesial, excuse me, lingual buccal, the mesial lingual and distal lingual cusp of the upper cusps into the best place on the lower, whilst maintaining and then customizing and grinding that cusp down into that bowl, watching overlap, watching directional of the tooth so that everything flows up, and then not just quick grind and just get her down, but cautiously get it in so that there's still spacing there, so that the food has somewhere to go, but the food also can be held in with the buccal cusp. So this one I would touch up a little more, and it's going to be coming down a little bit as I grind, because I'll have to grind that lingual cusp down more because I want a little bit more exposure of this buccal cusp to help, again, prevent that food from sliding off. So again, this is all with the mindset of mincing, ball, swallow. So that's the whole idea behind this. And then again, in a crossbite situation, it's just then the buccal that's going to handle that into this. So it's basically the same type of theory. I'm going to take some anterior teeth now and just quickly show you about for the anterior on an upper. So allow me just 1 minute to prep some wax. Okay. So the standard, 1-to-1, 2-to-2 is not so much within my vocabulary anymore. I appreciate on the upper here that I'm governed by aesthetics and such. And I'm just going to take the pen out here. Aesthetics and such of the patient. So what I want to do is I'm going to have an idea of where I'm going to go for length on this, just based on the length of the upper tooth required for that patient. But now what I'm going to concentrate on is that chew cycle and that helicopter pad that I'm going to work within. So in this case, whether I set it like this, where there's lots of overbite, and you think, geez, that's a hefty amount. If that's what it needs for them and their needs, so their lip support or such, I'm okay with that, because again, what I'm going to do is make sure that I have that wiggle and that freedom so that this works without hitting, and it works within that chew cycle without hitting. So I'm going to quickly just tack in some of the upper anterior teeth here. Because again, what you're going to hear from me today is it's not an absolute, which means I'm not going to say to you, you must have a 1-to-1 relationship. No, I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is you need to set the upper teeth for what's necessary for that patient, but not get scared by it. So for example, I've set it like this as one example. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to color the lower of what's available. So the lower anterior teeth, and then I'm going to bring it in, and I'm going to change this to show you. Now I'm going to open up the articulator, and now you can see how I have that chew cycle. So now I'm going to pretend to chew cycle. So now for this patient, I'm going to say, yeah, it's because their teeth are worn, and the way they've worn, I'm going to have a little bit more of a horizontal cycle. So it's less vertical and more horizontal. And then because I saw the patient directly, I know when they speak and they posture, I know on 66s, they like to shoot out to their left a little bit. So now I'm going to take that articulator and I'm going to, again, posture to the left. And then what you're going to see is I'm going to be looking for green marks here on the teeth. Okay. And the only green mark that's there is right there. It's going to be hard to see on the video. Well, there it is. Right there. Okay. Now that's okay, because now what I was doing was I was functioning and I was moving and I was taking an idea of how it was working within a chew cycle. So instead of, again, moving the articulator like this, nope. I'm moving it in a chew cycle. So now, if there was a contact here, then I could grind that away. And I would say, no, I don't want that contact there because that's going to be bad. That's going to dislodge. So then I could modify things and very target modify things. So that's why I don't like to, again, use the paper, because the paper can crinkle and give you wrong, erroneous markings. I like coloring because it's fun to color, and it allows me to be more accurate. So because, again, it's hard to know every specific situation, what I'm doing is I now say that patient only needs a really shallow upper anterior teeth, and I don't need a lot of overbite and overjet for this case. Fine, I don't have a lot of overbite and overjet, but I'm still going to check it in the same manner. I'm still going to go through the chew cycle. So this is about doing different, whatever the patient needs, but what doesn't change is my ability to go in and how to check it. So now I can really increase my overbite and overjet. Okay, so let's go, something really, really strong. Okay, and say you have to keep it close. So say, you know what, Mark? Yeah, for this case and this patient, I really have to have. Let's try to hold it so you can see. I really have to have a lot of overbite, Mark, but it's not a lot of overjet because it's really tight in there. So it's the same idea. I'm gonna set the teeth to work within that for that person. But what doesn't change now is, again, me coloring. Just get the camera over. Me coloring, so that's fresh. And then again, holding in and now going through what I think is the necessary motion, okay? And then I go through and I check it, and then I'm looking for the marks on the back of the teeth. And then I can customize and take out only where it's required, not thinning the whole thing, only where it's needed. So I'm trying to maintain the structural integrity of the tooth, and yet still working within the specific confines of these teeth and how they're shaped. So you have to appreciate, again, I circle back to, this is me customizing it for the person, and I'm trying to build them a denture that is really customized to them. And if I don't have a lot of information from the doctor, because I don't get any, then again, if I know that I'm a tight overbite and overlap, then I'm going to make sure that I take the articulator and I'm going to go through a chew cycle to go ahead and facilitate what I think is going to be a chew cycle to at least do something. I have a case here just even on a hinge articulator. It's still the same. Just don't do this. Take it and move it in a chew cycle. You still can do it. Okay? I mean, the articulator, it's still going to help guide you, but now just take it into a chew cycle. So you can kind of work with it. You just got to change your hands over and start doing that instead. Okay, Jim, next question, if there's any.
We have several, so if you want to just maybe wrap up, and then we'll go wrap ourselves up unless you're done.
Yeah, so the idea of taking some questions as I was going was just in case that was site specific to what we were talking about, then I could show it right away. So thanks everyone for that. So the mindset again behind this was, again, chew cycle. Patient has a chew cycle, patient has freedom in centric. Don't lock the bite in because you need a helicopter pad to land in because you can't pinpoint centric each and every time. And then especially on an upper denture, now what I'm doing is I'm customizing it in and I'm slowly grinding it into position whilst maintaining integrity. So the integrity of, number one, making sure that the directional force is up into the ridge. Number two, that it's not always tight, that there is still some gapping so the food has somewhere to stay. And that then again, the buccal cusp is there overlapping to help hold the food on the lower, because it's the lower's job to bring the food to the upper, to get minced, to make a ball and swallow the ball. And then the upper anterior teeth is wherever you need to set them, you set them. But then I'm working within that chew cycle to make sure that there's clearances specific, then especially cleared out to the lower 6 anterior teeth and their shape, targeted adjustments to this to make it work for the patient. Okay. Go ahead with the questions, Jim.
All right, so you ready for me to put my slides back up?
Yep. I'm switching out. You can assume control.
All right, so thank you, Mark. Greatly appreciate it. I just want to run through a couple things before we conclude here and answer the last of the questions. So those of you that are typing in asking about the education CE, we will use your registration information and get you some CE, whether it's a letter or accredited towards the spot, you know, the request, whether it's CE for MBC, whether it's a letter for your for Canada, or a dentist if you're looking for CE as well, a letter as well, as far as ADA cert. So anyway, the workshop has been recorded, so you can revisit this and go back and recover anything that you want that Mark has demonstrated or shown or spoke about. You can go back and review and do it a couple times. At the end of this, I'll show you Mark's information, contact information. He's gracious enough to allow customers to go ahead and get a hold of him. If he doesn't get a hold of you right away, don't fret. He's a busy person. He's got an active clinic that he's doing it. So also the recordings are on the VITA North America YouTube channel, so come visit us. Mark's done a tremendous number of webinars for us in the last couple of years, plus others before that, before the COVID as well. These continue to be very popular and an easy way for you as technicians, busy technicians, to earn credit as well as get educated. If you need to get a hold of us at the VITA Help Desk, this is their information. Mark showed this earlier. These are the list of the territory reps. We've added a couple more since this, Mark, so I'll have to add to my PowerPoint itself and then send you an updated one since you use in your presentation as well. Remember, we do have ongoing courses. Mark is actually going to be doing another course in August 4th. And it's kind of like a precursor. I look at this, Mark, as a precursor to the actual hands-on, remote hands-on one that we have scheduled, you know, later on August 9th and so forth, 9, 10, and 11. It's about class 2 denture setup as well. So, but visit us. You know, we have a lot of active workshops with Mark and others. So please feel free to get a hold of us and look at the website, VITA North America website, look at the education, what's available coming down the pipe. This is the information from Mark. As far as, again, you can certainly email him or give him a call. But remember, he is a working class denturist like the rest of us. So he's a busy person working with his patients and so forth. So give him time to respond. Whether it's by phone and or email. And then the rest of the questions, Mark, when you have a patient that speaks the month and the year, if it's off, if you detect something is off, how do you know whether to close, open, redo the overjet, the overbite? What are the signs to go one direction or the other?
Right. So the idea behind watching someone phonetically pronounce words is I'm trying to watch the tracking of the lower jaw, and is it coming out straight within that chew cycle? So again, I'm trying to identify this, and then I'm noticing when they speak, if I see them go out to one side, then when I set the teeth in the lab, I'm going to make sure that I favor that side so that they come over and I can make sure I've got clearance there. So I'm trying to save myself some grief later on. So the idea is again, that is at the established vertical. So the vertical would be 1 to 3 millimeters of freeway space of what we deem clinically as desirable for a patient. That is a gut call to say, well, 1 to 3 millimeters is like 1 to 3 miles. So what is the correct vertical for that person? We sometimes have a typical propensity to over open patients. So again, that comes down to your treatment planning and your consultation of, are they symptomatic at the current height that they're at? And are they showing signs of being symptomatic? Symptomatic means, are they having issues, hearing issues? Why are they in your office to begin with? But say we've established a 2 millimeter freeway space for that case, and I'm noticing that they track a little bit to say they're right, then I'm going to make so that the denture teeth track on the right a little more because I know their jaw posture's there. So that's the whole idea behind that, is then I favor the articulator in that side, and then I can grind the teeth to favor that side without damaging the teeth. Because again, that's the beauty of the VITA product, is that I'm able to customize it and adapt it to what the patient requires without damaging it. And that was why I've, again, full circle ended up, using VITA product, is because it's allowed me that greatest flexibility to do it in without damaging it and maintaining its integrity.
All right. Another question came up on, do you use base plates, bite rims, and the follow-up question was, what about digital? Are you moved more into the digital world?
Okay. Well, those are 3 questions. So give me a minute. Yes, digital. Yes, I do digital. Yes, it's there and it's working. So the answer is yes, following the same principles as here. Now you just have to use a mouse and move teeth to what you think you need to do on a computer screen. The second question was regarding, do I use base plates? So no, I do not use base plates anymore. I do not use shellac. I do not use Ivoline or even a printed base plate. I do not. I have gone to hardened wax. Now the reason is, hardened wax to me is more like a denture base finish. And I use this, so it's from Candular. It's a little bit of a bugger to deal with because, of course, with hardened wax, it breaks easy, so you have to have a light touch to it. The reason being is because it's smooth, and it's smooth like a finished base. So what I'm trying to do is to emulate the finished base texture of a denture as much as I can at a wax try-in stage or a bite registration stage. Typically, base plates are rougher and thicker, and it's a different sensation on the oral mucosa. So it's a rougher texture or a different texture down on the gum, and the central nervous system of the patient is picking up a different feel and a different sensation. And then you're going to get an erroneous reading. So for those clinically that are watching still, typically you would put in wax rims and you'd say to the patient, close, and then they do this, and they stick their chin out to you, and they bite over here, and then you're like, no, just relax, close. When they do this, no, just bite. When they do this again, just take the tip of your tongue to the back of your throat. No, the tip of your tongue to the back of your throat. No, the other way. And they still waggle their tongue out at you. That was it's fun working with people. What I realized is that the wax try-in was so different in feel and sensation than the old denture that they knew well. That's why the brain became confused. The central nervous system didn't know what to do. And then when you try to tell someone, and especially again a senior, stick your tongue to the back of your throat and bite, like forget it. They're not, that's hard to do. Even me, take the tip of your tongue. You know, you got to think about these things. And as we get older, it's harder to think. So that's why I use this hardened wax, because for me, it's emulated the feel, the texture of the finished product more, so that I'm not befuddling the central nervous system as much. So I hope that answers all three questions.
All right, thanks. No, it does. I believe. If not, they can rewrite another question or follow up. So another question we do have, or call you or email you, yes. So the question is basically, you've got everything set up in a freedom of movement technique. And then over the years, as the patient chews and wears the denture teeth, do they become a locking setup?
Yes, it can. It can. And that's now the trick. Is it loose because it needs a reline, because the denture base is just loose against the tissue? Or is it loose because the bite's locking in, but they can't tell us because they can't feel it? That's the trick. And that's the beauty of this. So again, when I say you reline it and you reline it and you reline it and you reline it, and it doesn't work because it didn't need to be relined. So how do we check clinically? Is we take our fingers and we push, I'll pick on the bottom, we push on the bottom. And if I don't see a lot of rotation and a lot of movement, then it's fitting on the tissue pretty good. The second thing is I give them a drink of water. So I want them to drink. When they drink, they swallow. They'll always find their physiologic centric. And then I take my finger and I place it on the lower plate and I push. And if that thing has suction, it doesn't need to be relined. So then it's probably the bite, which then I will go in and try to find that locked in guiding plane somewhere. Again, and it's based on, I ask them, when was it loose? Tell me specifically. You're the one that wears this. So when do you find it loose? When you eat, after you eat, during you eat, when you speak for a long time, tell me what's happening, because then that helps guide me of what to do. The question is brilliant. Yes, the bite locks in, and yes, you have to unlock it periodically because of wear.
All right. That makes sense. All right, so we'll wrap it up with this last question. What is the protocol for building a complete upper when the patient only has anterior 6 through 8 remaining and does not want a lower partial?
Lots of talking and prepping a patient about the laws of physics. And when you bite, it's going to move. So the laws of mechanics. Okay, so with that said, realistically, as a treatment practitioner, let's just go to the brass tacks on this one. You're going to need a bite table, because now they're only biting in the anterior region. Okay, so they have no posterior teeth. They're biting only in the anterior. So realistically, you know, all the bites are going to be on the front end of this case. So now we need a bite table. So the bite table is so that the lower anterior teeth are biting into acrylic right behind the anterior teeth, so that there's a table and a stability to bite into. And then that all has freedom. So I make sure the whole thing has freedom in it, so that there's the bite cycle and the wiggle room and the helicopter pad all within those 6 or 8 teeth, so that the stability comes there. Then you're gonna have to touch that up in the mouth. So then I color the bottom teeth, the natural teeth, but you can't use the pens. but I go in and I color them and I just have them hang out and talk, so then I can pinpoint touch up as required. So the answer is yes, you can do it, but it's going to need a bite table. And the difficulty with the bite table is that can restrict the amount of space for your tongue. So I've been very good at getting a very strategic molded bite table to not take a lot of space away from the tongue. So it's very strategic to the shape of the lower teeth.
Right.
Build it for them.
Well,
this is about them. And again, it's not about whether they're right or wrong. They don't want a partial. Okay, well, so then you either say to them, then I'm not the right practitioner for you. If you're not going to follow my treatment plan that you need the partial, then we part our ways. And you have that choice. Or you take it on and you say, well, okay, I've informed you that this is the best protocol. You've chosen to go here. So we're going to document this and I'm going to have you sign it. Then we're going to follow this. But now they're still relying on you to try and make it work as best as you can. So you've taken it on. So now you have to embrace it to say, okay, this is how I'm going to treat it. So that's how I do it. Yeah, there's not ideal situations. I'm not an ideal person either sometimes to manage. So the point is that that's the beauty of what we do for a living, is we're trying to customize it. And that's been my goal now, and really my awareness, to say this is about the patient and I'm trying to mold myself to them as much as possible. And that's where my success has come, where I use product that allows me to do it. My mindset has let go. I've tried to let go of the restrictions and the preconceived, again, notions of how it should be. I've tried to let go of that and become more flexible to it. And I'm thankful to VITA for supporting us again in our quest to be better and to look after our patients, and again to their product that allows me to be able to do it.
Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate those thoughts. And any other last parting thoughts for our customers?
Again, thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks for investing in yourself, and again for the end goal, which is your patients that are there, whether you see them directly or not, and then again your own best mental health, especially in relation to dentures. I wanted to provide some tips and some insight to again get you thinking. And again, I appreciate change is hard. And change management is difficult. Geez, do I want to take on what Mark has said? You have to write yourself little cheat notes and things, because you always fall back into the same parameter of where you were before. This was just, again, an overshot of my journey of a practitioner, just trying to make a difference and be better, and to look after my patients. And then again, my struggles, but what I've done to do to try and again, get better and minimize those struggles. So thanks everyone. I really appreciate your time, and again, trying to amp up your superhero denture skills that you have to make even a better difference. And again, thanks to Jim and to VITA North America.
Well, thank you. Everyone can revisit Mark's journey of today on our VITA North America YouTube channel in a couple of days. Also on your screen is Mark's contact information. Again, feel free to contact him by phone or by email. Just give them a couple of days. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Appreciate it. We always learn a great deal from Mark, and thank you very much, Mark, for your time and your effort of educating. And this will conclude today's webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mark.